Hello, how are you today? Do you want to dive into a book that might just surprise you, whether it becomes your next favorite or one you might skip? Let's find out what readers are saying about it.
Deborah, who has 152 likes, says, dark, gripping, thought-provoking, and shocking. Beautiful Ugly keep me on my toes and managed to shock me with one of the reveals in the book. I listened to the audiobook and highly recommend it as the narrator did a great job bringing this clever and well thought out book to life. I didn't want to put this one down. I have to say some of the aspects of this book reminded me old horror books which I enjoy reading. Beautiful Ugly is another addictive book by Alice Feeney. Grady Green is an author who experienced the best and worst day in this life all at once. He is on the phone with his investigative journalist wife, Abby, to share with her some news he is very excited about, but instead he is horrified when she stops her car and gets out. A year after his wife went missing and her car was found near a cliff. Grady is wallowing in grief and cannot write, sleep or function. His agent sends him to Amberley, an island off the coast of Scotland, to get away from things and to write. He will be staying at the home of a best-selling reclusive author who has passed away. There he will have some time to himself and hopefully get his life and writing back on track. The islanders are welcoming yet odd. They are polite yet aloof. He chalks it up to them living on an island that relies on the ferry to bring them news and items from the outside world. It is there that he sees a woman wearing a red coat who looks exactly like his wife. I loved the vivid descriptions of the island. The towering redwoods, the lush forests, the home on the edge of the cliff. It sounds like a lovely and relaxing place to visit and stay for a while. Doesn't it? I had no idea what I was getting into when I began this book. I loved the eerie feel of the island, the islanders, and the tension and unease that began to seep from the pages. What began as a relaxing getaway in order to focus and write becomes something completely different for Grady. As he began to experience odd things, I began to wonder to myself what was happening. What a brilliant psychological thriller. I was completely invested in the plot and Grady's plight. I became more anxious for him as the book progressed. I love trying to figure books out, but sat back and enjoyed this wild ride of a book. I ate up the eerie feel and uneasy vibe of this book. Plus, there were quite a few shocking twists and a jaw-dropping reveal which I did not see coming at all. I love it when that happens. Dark, shocking, well thought out, and addictive. Thank you to Macmillan Audio and NetGalley, who provided me with a copy of this book in exchange for an honest review. All the thoughts and opinions are my own. Read more of my reviews at www.openbookposts.com. Rachel, who has 158 likes, says, not only did this make me not to want to pick up another Alice Feeney novel ever again, but this made me genuinely question if I even like the thriller, mystery genre. That is just how much of an utter stinker this book is. The premise is cool, if not something seen before. A woman, Abby, goes missing under mysterious circumstances. Over a year later, her husband, Grady, is still struggling to come to terms with the loss. How can you ever move on if you don't have answers? Struggling with life and also with his forthcoming book. His agent sends him to a remote Scottish island where he begins to confront whether he's going crazy, or that this island had something to do with his wife's disappearance. At first, I actually enjoyed this. The vibes were eerie and suspenseful. I also noticed Feeney had reined in her colloquialisms from good bad girl to a way that still worked for her, but also made it sound believable coming from the narrative of a down on his luck, pretentious author. Kudos to her. Off to a good start. But then the suspense kept building, and building, and building, and there was no payoff until the last 20 pages. At that, pages that didn't even make sense. This whole book felt like I was waiting for a metaphorical gun to go off. But instead of ending with a bang, the gun backfired and I got absolutely hammered in the head. In other words, it left me with a headache. Why, might you ask? It's because the plot twist big reveal made absolutely no sense whatsoever. For example, the first big twist is that Grady was the woman lying in the road when Abby got out of her car and then attempted to kill her. There are so many things wrong with this plot point that I wanted to hurl the book in the garbage. Then set it on fire. Then tie a cement block to the bottom and let the charred husk of this book decay at the bottom of the ocean. First off, based on Grady's description, this makes no sense. He is written as a physically masculine character. This is attempted to be explained away by saying that Grady was wearing a red coat. But there is a very distinctive difference between a masculine build and a feminine build, regardless of what coat you're wearing. Second, since Abby and Grady were on the phone the whole time, and Grady was on speaker phone, there is no way Abby could have not heard the wind and sea in the background of Grady's call. Not to mention that if he was lying on the ground and positioned in a way to disguise his face, after running for over a mile, he should have sounded muffled and or out of breath. Third, Grady's agent tries to account for his alibi that he was waiting for Abby at home when she went missing, when, in reality, he got her phone call, ran down the road, and then threw himself in the middle of the road to intercept Abby. Once again, this makes no logical sense. The timing is too tenuous and doesn't add up to when he got off the phone with his publisher. Also, considering how easy it is to flip back to the first chapter where this incident is written, the stories and timelines don't add up. However, most annoying, illogical by far, is Grady's attempt to kill Abby. For the entire novel, Grady is written as a passive man who would do no harm to others. Strangers frighten him. He loves his dog. He's friendly with the locals even when they're unkind to him. Nor does he exhibit any signs of anger or other behavioral issues. Even in the excerpts from Abby's perspective, he seems like a harmless guy with a narcissistic streak. Sure, he would be the type of person to stand by while someone gets hurt. But he would never be the person to pick up the weapon and hurt someone himself. Except for the one scene where the plot conveniently calls for it. And even then, he goes through all this trouble to kill Abby only to throw her off the cliff and not check to make sure she actually fell off the cliff. On one hand, I get it, there's no way a person could survive that fall. Except Abby did, by grabbing onto a loose tree branch to stop her fall, like a cartoon, while chloroformed, and held on until she could pull herself up. Bitch, are you Hercules? The second twist happens after Abby makes the big reveal she's still alive. This is the reveal where the agent, her godmother, who for some reason is also named Abby, reveals that her perspective is the alternate perspective the reader has been reading throughout the novel, except it's not because there are chapters, i.e., the night of Abby's disappearance, written from Grady's Abby's perspective. This has zero continuity. So, after all this hullabaloo, why the big reveal on the creepy island? Get ready. Prepare yourself for the worst plot twist you'll ever hear. It's because a bunch of women, who had been wronged by men, decided to band together and make an island with no men and no connection to the outside world. Which, sure, that sounds fun hypothetically, but makes no sense from a realistic perspective. Or even reporting your taxes to the government perspective, 'cause that's the whole thing. Because this island generates zero income and is actively losing money due to their isolation, reliance on the outside world for basic goods. They need a resident author to bring money back to their island. And considering that there's a lot of contingencies on Grady, his will to live, if people will actually like his book, etc., this seems absolutely stupid. Why not have one of the women who had a dream of writing and making a difference such as Abby do that? Why would you need a man who everyone hates because of what he did to Abby to complete said quota? And what happens when he dies or the royalties run out? Is there not a simpler solution? The absolute stupidest plot I have ever read aside, there were also a number of smaller things that set me off about this book. I am tired of Alice Feeney being on this kick of using oxymoronic titles that make no sense. Yes. She tries to use an entire chapter to justify the title of the book. But it only makes her sound like she has the intelligence of a rock. And I know she's smarter than that. I loved rock, paper, scissors. The second thing, that is more of a personal thing, is how no editor stopped Alice Feeney from writing these atrocious little articles by Abby. No newspaper would have published those. The way she wrote it was not newsworthy or follows basic news formatting. Inverted pyramid, anyone? It follows no AP guidelines and is riddled with spelling and grammatical errors. It is heavily skewed and, if published, would be classified as an op-ed. She would be fired long before she would be awarded. Excuse my ire and foul language, but don't write newspaper articles into your novel if you don't know how to fucking write them. I did not study journalism for 4 years to be tormented like this. Horrendously long review aside, I will never be purchasing another novel by Alice Feeney again. I love her older works, but it's as if someone beat her over the head with a baseball bat while writing her new ones. Shania, who has 482 likes, says 3/5 stars. There's no need to be afraid of the dead. It's the living that you have to watch out for. Beautiful Ugly was easily one of my most anticipated reads of 2025. And I was counting down the days until its release. I couldn't have been more thrilled to get an advanced copy. And for that, I want to sincerely thank NetGalley and Macmillan Audio for providing me with the opportunity to read it early in exchange for an honest review. It truly felt like a gift to dive into this story ahead of time. Alice Feeney has always been one of my go-to authors. The kind of writer whose books I pick up without a second thought as soon as they're released. Naturally, I was just as eager to dive into this one. However, to say I was a bit disappointed would honestly be an understatement. I've always loved her previous works and went into this hoping for the same magic. But try as I might, I just couldn't connect with it. The story felt overly complicated, and some of the twists and turns didn't even make sense, leaving me more confused than intrigued. It lacked the seamless brilliance I've come to expect from her books. And that was hard to ignore. About the book, this story follows a couple with a crumbling marriage, desperately trying to hold on. One day, the wife mysteriously vanishes without a trace. No notes, no explanations, just gone. Her husband, frantic and heartbroken, does everything in his power to find her, but all efforts fail. The weight of her disappearance takes a toll on him, plunging him into depression. Unable to write, he follows his agent's advice to retreat to a secluded island for peace and inspiration. But the island proves to be anything but tranquil. He begins to see his wife, hear her voice, and experience eerie, unexplainable events. The locals are just as unsettling, raising more questions than answers. Did he finally find his wife? Was it all in his mind? And why did the island seem to awaken something so strange, so specific, only for him? About the characters. Grady Green, the husband, the author and male lead in this story, was easily one of the most frustrating characters I've ever read. Honestly, I can't sugarcoat it, this man lacked every ounce of common sense. As a thriller author, you'd expect him to pick up on the strange and unsettling things happening on the island. But no, he was utterly oblivious to even the most obvious clues. While I sympathized with him initially, thinking he was just a victim of his circumstances, it became clear that his cluelessness was his defining trait. What also grated on me was how often The author repeated how much Grady loved his books and solitude. We get it, he's passionate about writing and enjoys being alone. But the constant mentions started to feel redundant and unnecessary, adding little to his character. By the end, I was left shaking my head at how infuriatingly naive and oblivious Grady turned out to be. Abby Green. Abby Green, the journalist, the planner and female lead of this story, felt like such an insignificant character to me. Even now, as I am writing this review, I can't think of a single standout moment that justified her presence in the book. She wasn't even the mastermind behind the plot. That credit went to her godmother. It felt like she was simply there to move the story along, without much depth or significance to her role. That being said, I won't deny that after learning about her past and what she endured, I did start to pity her. Seeing things through her perspective added some emotional weight, and I could understand her struggles better. However, even that wasn't enough to make me truly love or connect with her character. I just wish the story had given us more insight into Abby's thoughts and motivations. Something that would have made her feel more fleshed out and impactful. About the writing. Now, you might be wondering, if I didn't love much about this book, why did I rate it 3 stars? Well, the answer lies solely in how much I adore Alice Feeney's writing style. Her storytelling is truly captivating, and this book was no exception. Despite my frustrations, it managed to keep me on edge the entire time. I found myself constantly thinking about what would happen next, unable to put it down until I had all the answers. Her books always seem to have this effect on me. And honestly, that's a testament to her skill as an author. Call me biased, but it's the reason I rated this book as high as I did. Even when the plot or characters didn't meet my expectations, her ability to grip the reader and create suspense carried the story for me. About the plot. When it comes to the plot, I felt it was overly complex and, at times, nonsensical. I kept waiting for that classic Feeney twist, the one that leaves you completely stunned. But unfortunately, it never came. The story felt poorly executed and exaggerated in parts, which only added to my frustration as I read. What made it worse was the sense of wasted potential. The premise had so much promise, and I truly believe it could have been an incredible read if the execution had been stronger. Instead, the underwhelming delivery of the plot left me disappointed, and I couldn't help but feel that the story fell short of what it could have been. Overall, if you're in the mood for a book that keeps you hooked from start to finish, making you think and constantly guess what might happen next, then this could be the perfect read for you. Thank you to NetGalley and Macmillan Audio for providing me with an ARC in exchange for an honest review. Pre-read review. Got my first ever ARC OMG, I am so freaking excited. Meg's Book Rack, who has 167 likes, says, "Did I just read my favorite book of 2025? I am gagged. I am gobsmacked. I am elated. I had so much fun reading this. I highly recommend the audiobook. Fabulously narrated by Richard Armitage and Tuppence Middleton. It's like Feeney wrote this with me in mind. The very start of this novel gripped me so hard I could barely breathe. That's how you start a story. I can't remember if it was a prologue or just the first chapter, but I was immediately hooked. This story follows author Grady Green, who we meet when he is on the cusp of receiving some excellent news for his career. His wife, Abby, is running late for dinner and he is anxious for her to return home, so they can hear the news together and celebrate. They end up on the phone on her drive home, and while speaking, she comes across a person laying in the road. He tells her to keep driving, but she insists on stopping. He hears her get out of the car, with him still on the line, but never hears anything from her again. Picking up a year later, Grady is an absolute mess. He can't sleep, he can't concentrate, and he certainly can't write. There are so many unanswered questions. Abby's car was found. All of her belongings still there. But she was just gone without a trace, worried about his state of mind. His agent, Kitty, who was Abby's godmother, offers Grady an escape, the use of her cabin, a verifiable writer's retreat, on the remote Scottish island of Amberley. By remote, we're talking only a handful of people live on this island year-round. Grady is willing to try anything. He needs to get his mind straight. So along with his lovable Labrador, Columbo, he sets off for Amberley. From the very start, things do not go as planned. Once there, even he is shocked by the remoteness. It's a bit like traveling back in time. The atmosphere, the solitude, the quiet, it ends up getting under his skin and into his mind, complicating matters further. He keeps seeing a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. How can this be? Is it just the island playing tricks with his mind? Or is Abby alive and well on Amberley? Beautiful Ugly has everything I love. I was beyond immersed. I barely remembered the synopsis by the time I picked it up, and I loved the directions Feeney took. This one, not to mention. The ending left me with that exquisite little evil grin on my face that I love so much at the end of any thriller story. It was brilliantly executed. I am an atmosphere girly. First and foremost, and the atmosphere in this is off the charts. The island itself was so interesting. We get to meet quite a few of the regular residents, and they had me scratching my head. It's an odd group of people. There were aspects that reminded me a bit of Thomas Oldhoyvolt's Hex. Just in regards to the overall mystery of this little community. In fact, this did feel like she was towing the line into horror territory on more than one occasion with the haunting descriptions of this location. As an island resident myself, I feel like Feeney truly nailed the island vibes. From the troubles with getting a ferry to and from, to the isolation over the off-season months, the mystery and suspense of the story also kept me guessing and kept me wanting more. I read this so quickly because I needed to know the truth of what was going on. I know some readers are not going to like the truth behind the mystery, but for me, I felt it was really fun, and I am happy with how it all turned out. I would absolutely recommend this story to any mystery thriller reader, particularly if you've enjoyed other works by Feeney. I feel like it's a must-read for 2025. I loved it. Thank you so much to the publisher, Macmillan Audio, for providing me with a copy to read and review. I consider Feeney to be an absolute queen of suspense. And she didn't disappoint here. CC, who has 153 likes, says, "The queen of the twisty twist is back and her crown is firmly in place. Life is both beautiful and ugly. The day Grady Green becomes a New York Times best-selling author is both the best day and the worst day of his life." Why so? His doggedly brave investigative journalist wife Abby is driving home when he calls her to share his excitement. Mid-call, she suddenly brakes, gets out of the car and disappears. A panic-stricken Grady dashes to find her, discovers the car with its headlights on, the driver's door wide open, but there's no sign of Abby. 1 year on, in a state of stasis, he's unable to function in any way, shape, or form, stuck in an awful land of limbo. When he's offered the use of a cabin on the tiny Scottish island of Amberley, he jumps at the chance, traveling north hoping to find the peace and tranquility he needs to get his life back on track. Perhaps it will even enable him to pen a new novel. There, the impossible happens. Can the impossible become the impossible? There are so many layers to this latest psychological thriller from one of my favorite authors, but first let me mention the beautiful and magical descriptions of Scotland. The love of the place really stands out, with a rich and ever-changing atmosphere permeating all. You get all weathers in one day, which could equally apply to the ever-changing mood of those that live on the island and of Grady himself. As he approaches the island, there's a strong sense of calm before a storm, although his excitement and anticipation are infectious. Perhaps, though, the noisy seagulls as he awaits the ferry to whisk him amberly sound a warning that he should heed. Prophetically so, as it soon becomes very ominous, the peace of the island. Its isolation and silence are used so masterfully to drop little bombshells into the illusionary calm, which of course, being Alice Feeney, are often worthy of an OMG jaw drop. It's very cleverly done, as you become as unsure as Grady about what's real and what not. Is someone playing mind games, or is it Grady's mind that is broken? The island becomes stranger and stranger, with the residents behaving oddly and the whole feel is off kilter. At times it has a sense of Stepford Wives, which is very unnerving. There's tension which underpins the whole storyline, and there are occasions where it's so intense I realize that I am holding my breath, as well as having a spooky, chilling and sinister tone. It's also a very good character study. All are well portrayed, but especially Grady and Abby. Through them a number of pertinent issues are raised and questioned, which I really enjoy. It has several twists, of course, and an excellent ending just desserts. Overall, this is a thought-provoking and suspenseful psychological thriller. It's perhaps a bit more understated than some of her other novels, but it packs a punch nonetheless. Highly recommended, with thanks to NetGalley and especially to Pan Macmillan for the much appreciated arc in return for an honest review. Publishes in the UK in January 2025.